All right. Welcome to week 13, last day of actual real content. Actually, I went through the exam and not even any of this content's on the exam. Um, it's interesting things that might help you for your practical assessment, so we'll cover some of it. All right, so basically the topic today is various functions you can use inside of MySQL to make your life better. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is concat. Different database servers will do concatenation differently. A lot of them do offer a concat function, which is good. Oracle offers a concat function, kind of. It does. It's just it's Oracle special. MySQL offers a concat function, which is really straightforward. Postgres actually uses special characters for concatenation. So you know how in oh boy, JavaScript you do string one plus string two equals like a bigger string, and in Python it's pretty much the same idea. In Postgres, you use double pipe. So string one, double pipe, string two, field one, double pipe, field two, and you can glue shit together that way. MySQL doesn't have that functionality. It has a function for it, which makes it a little more difficult to plan around because, you know, you got to take care of all the different permutations. So if I go, I know the functions are not case sensitive. This is special. It made a single string. So if they're just so far, um, that's how you do it. And you just put in all the arguments. In theory, you can. Um, where is it? Just want to double check what the data looks like in here. So you can do city, comma, space, comma, what's the other one we can go with? Country code. Country code from city. And it's not the column name, it's name. You can also concatenate fields. So sometimes you have a database where user information or client information is actually separated with first name, middle name, or middle initial, last name, but you just want to display the person's name. You can just do a concat and actually output it as a single string instead of multiple strings. Obviously, if you're working with a programming language, you could just retrieve all three and concatenate in the programming language. You know, take your pick. There's no advantage in either direction, but it's one thing you can do. So case, actually, you know, I'm going to actually just pull up the slide this way. So the case statement allows you to switch hang on, do it. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. So the case statement is the same idea as a switch statement in JavaScript. I don't remember if it's called switch or case in Python, but you know, it's the same idea where you set up a set of rules and then you can, based on those rules, control what the output looks like. So if I format it a little better, you can actually see how it works. So it's basically a fancy if statement. But what's kind of cool is you can actually use standard SQL operators, including pattern matching, as part of this. Whereas with a lot of languages, you can't really do this as part of the case evaluation. I know Java and JavaScript don't let you do the actual Boolean operation as in the case, in the when part of it. Um, PHP does, because PHP is better. Uh, or it just lets you do it because it lets you do it. Everybody can flame each other on whatever way they want on their choice of language. But it's kind of cool because you can actually set up multiple rules and actually be really fancy with it. And it just controls, the output. Um, and of course, we can't talk about case unless we talk about if. Um, I think an if statement's pretty straightforward. Um, Now, what's interesting is the way the if statement works is if condition true, false. It doesn't look like the normal if statements we're used to seeing where you go, if condition, and then if it's a JavaScript, you'll open up your curlies, whatever. Then you have a close curly, then an else, open curly, and a bunch of statements. This one here, it's actually literally a function. Um, Not all SQL implementations handle the if statement the same way. I know for a fact Postgres does it much more like a case statement, where you can actually do if, else if, else if, else if, else if, else. Which at that point really should be using a case statement, but you know, it's still kind of nifty. Um, you can get a little more complicated. Let's go grab this guy right here, which is basically doing the same um, idea as the case statement, but you'll notice this is how you do an else if. Yeah, so you do if, condition, true. If not true, let's do another if statement and basically nest them. It's actually really kind of gross. There we go. Let me clean that up so the parentheses line up. And if we run it, it does the exact same thing as the case statement. Let me tell you, the case statement's way easier to read than this is. That's the problem when you do if statement as a function, not as an actual logic gate. Um, so based on my reaction, you can tell I do prefer using the case statement whenever possible. If is really difficult to work with. Now, the date functions, that's something I didn't really talk about when we were learning about SQL originally. Dates indexes are kind of weird in the sense that database servers are very, very picky. Um, some of them are picky about how you format the dates, Oracle. Other ones will only take one date format, MySQL. Others, like Postgres, will say, hey, you want to write a date? Give it to me any way you want, and I know how to parse it. Type in November 11th, 2023. It knows that it's 2023, 11/11. You type in, 22/11/2024. It knows it's November 22nd, 2024. Postgres's date parser is like the best. Um, However, one of the interesting things that um, happens, and let's go switch to the employee database for this example. Um, this one only shows dates, so we'll just stick to that for a second. Employees, paste, and run. So this literally shows all our functions in one place. So there's date of birth, year of birth, month of birth, day, what week, what day, and the difference. So um, what the heck's a diff do? It's not the normal diff I'm used to seeing. Okay, so yeah, that's what I thought. Number of days between since now. So whatever their date of birth and now is the number of days. And you can see they're all pretty much the same because they're all 1954, but they'll be in a range of 365 because 365 days in a year, plus leap years, right? Um, so the functions allow you to extract dates. Now, I don't think I actually have a proper database in this to show you guys. However, there is a gotcha with dates that a lot of people don't take into account. So let's say I can't really run this query because I don't have this data in place, but I'm just going to discuss dates was never discussed with you guys. Now, picture that this ordered field is not a date field, it's a timestamp. Okay, so essentially, that's midnight, the day. Now, the problem we have is when you use dates like this, but you don't include the time portion, it assumes you mean midnight. Fine, except right here, we're saying we want everything until November 30th. We're not going to get anything from November 30th because November 30th ends at that point. But if it assumes it's zero, it'll say to dead midnight on the 30th. So when you're working with dates, you have to be careful, which is where some of those date functions can come in handy. Because if we wanted to, we could rewrite this to uh, and that would give you everything for the month of November. So it's, one of those interesting quirks that you have to be aware of when you're working with dates. It's something you learn the hard way by suffering. Um, okay, our point. So that's our dates. Um, now, another interesting function is coalesce. And I'm so glad that this is one that's standard across all databases except Oracle. Oracle has a function called NVL, null value. So everybody else has a function called coalesce except for Oracle. Just, you know. I actually know someone who works with Oracle and they came in from another platform. They hated it so much they created their own coalesce function. It literally takes the argument and just runs NVL on it and returns. He just basically renamed NVL to coalesce, so it was like so he could take his code and just carry it from one server to the other. Um, so back to the world database for this one, and we go run, and you will see that for the country code ATA, it has language unknown. So if I were to put in just language here in front of it, so you can see what it's actually doing, you'll see that it's null. What coalesce does, it says, it's basically a null check. It says, if null, make it not null by making it this value. So people will use it you'll use this for all kinds of things. When, for example, you're trying to concatenate people's names, and you just happen to come from a country where some people don't have a last name. For example, Algonquin's access system really has a hard time with people that don't have two names. So you'll have students that have their first name in twice. You'll have other students where their last name is actually just a period because their system can't handle nulls and names at all. So, data entry people get clever. Um, One of the quirks about coalesce is you can actually tell it, hey, if there's nothing here, you can just substitute it to an empty string, which is another thing you can do. So instead of saying unknown, you can just turn it into an empty string, and you have just an empty string, but it's not a null, which means it's valid for uh, being used in aggregates. It's valid for being used to concatenate. It's valid in a join. Nulls act kind of funny. They don't sort properly because they're not a value. So if you try to do an order by and nulls are involved, it doesn't always work. So coalesce is the way to fix that. Um, Sometimes you'll have a use case for the nulls not wanting it and you want to substitute something else. I've also seen it used for capturing missing strings. So has anybody in here ever worked with having to deal with translations of any sort? No, I didn't think so, but sometimes I'd ask. Students surprise me every once in a while. So normally, like manual, you have values in a database that a person can pick. For example, um, you could have a drop down for um, units of measure, each, box, kilo, gram, whatever. Okay. If your application is multilingual, those have to be translated, but those values come from a database. So what do? You have the translations in another table called the shadow table. So you basically what it does is grab me this string from this table, but if it doesn't find it, what do? You'd use the coalesce to pull the English translation instead so that you don't have an empty value in the dropdown. You do really advanced things with this, but it is a very special purpose function. Like literally the function is I don't want to see nulls. That's literally its purpose in life is I don't want to see nulls. Um, and then we got our happy little floor and round. So let me grab this guy. Hmm. So average, you guys have seen. You guys have been here long enough that you probably know what rounding is, right? You do know how to round a number, right? Okay. Oof, getting stressed for a second there. People didn't know how to round a number. Now, what's cool with the rounding functionality is you can tell it how many decimal places of precision you want, or you can give it a negative value. So if we look, this is the original number here, right? And then we round it to 1222824. If we go -1, it actually starts rounding up before the decimal place. I'm not sure if this is a MySQL special or other database servers do this because I've never had the urge to round above the decimal place. I usually round to the decimal place and I've got an integer and I'm happy. Um, Often I'll use round to 2 digits when I'm dealing with international transactions because most exchange rates are usually 3 or 4 digits of precision on the decimal places. So when you convert, you want to round it so that the human eye doesn't see 4 digits for a decimal place. It's a bit like when you go buy gas, and gas right now is like what, a buck 59 two. $1, actually it's a buck 55 or something. So they show us 1555, 3 digits, but really it's back in the day before when gas was less than $1, it really made sense to have that extra decimal place. But now it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Yeah. So the other function we have is floor, which is it truncates the integer. So basically put, it takes the number and takes off the last digit. So in other words, it doesn't actually try to round it. So instead of being 122.824, it becomes 122.823 because we're just truncating off decimal places. Out of curiosity, pretty sure, yes, it does. Also has ceiling, which is not in the slides. Ceiling goes up the other way. So ceiling says is if there's any decimal place at all, round it to the next number, which is, by the way, how I do your grades. I always round up to the next digit. There's no rounding down. So, if you have like 89.1, congrats, you got a 90. You got 89.9, congrats, you got a 90. It saves me having to fight about that 1%. So, I do a ceiling on everybody's grade. It makes life a lot easier for everybody. So don't ask me to round up to the next number because I already did. Okay, this one's a cool function. It does it really, really well. Postgres has something similar. Oracle, you want to slit your wrists trying to do this. I recently had to do this and it was awful. It involved subqueries to do the exact same thing. So group concat essentially, well, let me just show you what it does. So if I didn't have the grouping, so if I let me just grab this query without the group concat. So let's go language, get rid of this, get rid of, I don't go limit 30. So we have enough examples. So I go run. So you'll see ABW has 1, 2, 3, 4 languages. Apparently Afghanistan has a lot of languages. AGO's got a lot. ALB, Albania's got 2. What this does, instead of going this way with the values, it goes sideways. So you take each of the repeating rows, you're grouping on the country code, but then you're just going to concatenate them using a comma. Basically creates a comma separated list of values so that if you don't want to show, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 languages, 9 rows for AGO, you can show it as a single row with all the values going sideways. Now, some people might wonder, well, what's the point of this? Because that's usually the next question. Often you'll see stuff like this for reports. For example, one of the people in my director's group is working, it's kind of an interesting thing. It's a partnership between the RCMP, the Border CBSA, the Canadian Border Services, Health Canada, and 2 other branches of the government, the departments of the government. It's called Single Window Initiative. Essentially, when everything gets shipped to Canada, shipping manifests get put into a computer system. There is, last I heard, close to 90 gigabytes of data a day coming out of this system. The problem is that sometimes the shipping manifests have corrections. And what's really dumb about how this whole system, not this system, but how it comes out of the American shipping system is if there's a correction, it doesn't correct the existing manifest, it creates a new manifest with the same shipment information, but with the corrections. And sometimes there'll be 10 corrections in one day because they bring in their shipping manifest, they put it up at the border. Suddenly the border guards say, dude, your truck looks kind of fishy today. Open her up. My son's a trucker. He's had to dump out his entire load 3 times in the last 2 years. He moves people. So, it's people's stuff that gets put out on the ground in the parking lot in the rain. It's great. And then they'll look at what's in the load, and then they'll update the shipping manifest in place. Suddenly there's 2, 3 rows. So one of the guys was trying to figure out a way to build up items uniquely based on a shipping ID. And that was his solution, was something like this, where you would find the manifest ID and just concatenate all the rows in, but only the distinct values. So there's a way of doing distinct in this also, but that's what he was doing, and it was a really nifty trick. Then again, it was in Oracle, so it was extra nifty, difficult. But that is a use you'd have something like this, is where you want to show the information, but you only row, but you want all the values going sideways from it. Because then this you can take into your preferred language. I think in JavaScript the function is called split. I think it's called split in Python. PHP it's called explode. I like explode a lot better. And you know the opposite is called implode. So you explode and you tell it what you split on, and then suddenly it'll give you an array with all the values in it. So yeah, that's that one. Okay. You know what? I'm going to hold this for next week because this is the stuff that's important. CTEs you're not going to use. I want to talk about the breakdown of the exam. Okay. Since I don't do formal reviews because I record my lectures, if you're not sure, just go look at the lecture. They're only half an hour to 45 minutes anyways. So this you should already know. I'm going to post this on Brightspace. I love when the cameras come out. So Access says your exam's on December 10th at 5:30 in H102. I already had my rant about H102 last week. Please eat before you come, or at least take a snack that's in a clear baggie, because the smells are going to send you up the wall. It's an hour and a half, 90 minutes. It's Scantron. What does that mean? Bring a good pencil or two, HB pencils, not pen. I will be checking all the Scantron sheets, and you may have to redo your Scantron sheet. Just saying. Okay. Also, make sure you circle your answers on the test. That's the backup plan. All right, so here's the question breakdown. Roughly. Stuff about the where clause. There's roughly 8 questions. I mean, there's more than just 8 about the where clause, but just in general, where clause, there's 8 questions. 5 questions about the like statement. 2 questions about sorting. 2 questions about DDL, because I said, you know what, might as well get you guys to check 2 questions. You should know this stuff by now. So pretty much what you did in Lab 5, that was due after the break, which is why I'm justifying it to myself, that you guys are getting some DDL. Column selection, that's the whole distinct, commas, that kind of thing. Aggregate functions grouped by and having, there's 8 questions. There's 1 question about views. 5 questions about subqueries and joins. And for question 23, the answer is A. You fucked up. Because what I did is I grabbed an exam for a different course that covers the same material, and I stripped out questions and I missed one. I was going through it again, doing up this thing, and I got to 23. I'm like, I didn't teach you guys about indexes in any kind of detail. I might have mentioned them, and that is all. The question was actually a very specific technical question about indexes. So congrats, everybody gets at least 1 point. If somebody ends up with a 0, I'll be very sad. It has happened. It has happened. Because they were off by 1. So the whole test was wrong. Thank goodness they circled their exam paper, because that's what saved them. So yeah, so for question 23, the answer is A. Just, it's life. Okay? It's a bonus question now. Everybody gets a 1 point bonus. So it's 35 questions, so that's 1 out of 35. So it's more than 1%. It's like 2 and some percent, like almost 3%. Okay. Um, excuse me. Um, outside of that, the other items is your practical assessment. It is during your lab period. If you don't know when your lab period is, that's not a good sign. Somebody asked. It is next week because there's no school after that, right? There's exam week after that. So the practical assessment is next week during your normal scheduled lab period. Make sure you have your Algonquify database loaded. Although the instructions are good, it's possible to make a mistake. Even people that are experienced with databases can make mistakes on this one. Just saying, just follow the instructions clearly and it shouldn't have any problem. It will create a database called Algonquify. It should have 6 tables if everything works. Um, I don't know why yet, but for some people it shows up in their schema on the left automatically. For some people it does not. I don't know why. I'll just put it out there right now. I don't know why. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not. But if it doesn't show up, you just like in lab 1, you go to your properties, go to your schemas and you turn it on. And then it'll show up here. When you have it on, like I said, you should see 6 tables. Some of these rows, this table has over 600,000 rows in it. Just saying, it's got a good chunk of data. This is the database. You need this database, although the practical assessment jumps between the Algonquify database, the world database, the employees database, possibly Sequila, because the tests are different between the different groups. So make sure you have all the databases you've been using this semester plus Algonquify. If you have the 4 databases, life is good. If you don't have all 4 databases, life not so good. Pardon? Exactly, because at least you know you got 1 point towards your final assessments. Okay, so at this point, I also get people ask me, do I actually need to do the final practical assessment? Yeah, I know. The people that actually come to class actually look at me like, what? Um, so you realize for this course, you must pass the 2 halves independently, right? So you must have 50% in your theory and 50% in your practical. And if you haven't been doing so good, you really need to do your practical assessment at the end because it's worth like 20% of your practical assessment part. So it's not worth 20% of your final grade. It's like 10% of your final grade, but for some people that 10% might be enough to, have a good day or not have a good day. So yes, you should do your practical assessment. Same rules of engagement as last time. It's an hour and a half, 6 questions. You're not creating any tables this time. That's not what this is about. Basically, it's joins and select statements. I am going to go double check it this week with a fine tooth comb, make sure there's no surprises language wise. So it's not as confusing as the last couple of labs have been. So I will make sure that they're nice and clear. They looked pretty reasonable the first time I read them, but I told myself I'm going to wait a week and then reread them to see how stupid I was the first time when I was reading it, right? Was I reading it with the tired goggles on or not? Um, but like I said, it's 6, 7 questions. It should be fairly straightforward if you know how to write an SQL statement and you've done the labs and you were able to get through the bad language of those labs. This should be a breeze. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? I hear, oh, there we go. To the practical? No, no, no. That's the point of a theory test. There, nowhere are you required to write an SQL statement. There are SQL statements that you have to read and understand what it's going to do. A cheat sheet will not help you understand. Yeah, it's multiple guess, true, false. You know, you can bring a dice if you want. 1d4, you know, a coin for the true, false. Take your pick. But yeah, no cheat sheets for the written test. But for the practical assessment, you can use pretty much whatever you want except AI, because it's probably going to get it wrong anyways. And or preferred telecommunication platform of choice. Whether it's Discord, Telegram, Facebook Messenger, whatever. No, you're going to put your phones away during the practical assessment. The only one allowed to have a phone is me. Okay. Man, I had one more thing to say. Okay, so any other questions? 3? Okay. I will be here in class next week if you have questions. I am not covering new material. I will be here if you are uncertain about the written exam. If you don't have any problems, you guys are free to run to your next class or sit here and do your work, whatever makes you happy. I will be here because I have to be here. Or I don't get paid. So it's either I cancel the class, don't get paid, or I come and I get paid. So I want to get paid. So I'll be here. I'm just being honest. You know, I'm very money driven. Uh, I'm being realistic, pragmatic. So outside of that, it's all good. This is it, folks. No new content. That's pretty much the end of the semester. I will see you guys at your practical assessments. Maybe see you guys here next week at this time. And hopefully I see you for your written exam. Because that's a shitty way to not pass. Just to not show up for your test. And if something happens, try let me know ahead of time. If your laptop dies, please let me know. Telling me 2 minutes before the exam is not the time to let me know that your exam is not working, your laptop's not working. Just saying. All right.